The quaint little gift shop was a hive of activity, its narrow aisles teeming with last-minute shoppers. The air was thick with the scent of scented candles and fresh stationery. I was there too, meandering through the shelves, my eyes skimming over quirky mugs and vintage clocks, searching for a unique keepsake. That's when I noticed him, a lone figure amidst the chaos, looking utterly perplexed and out of his element. He was standing in front of the greeting cards, flipping a card open and then snapping it shut, his brows knitted in concentration. A small, peculiar trinket dangled from his other hand. He seemed to be debating with himself, lost in a world of indecision. I couldn't resist. I took a few steps towards him and said, "Can't make up your mind?" He looked up, slightly startled by the intrusion. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, met mine, and for a moment, he seemed to forget his predicament. "Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm in a bit of a bind here. I'm James," he said, offering a hand. "I'm Anna," I replied, shaking his hand. It was a firm handshake, confident yet inviting. "Nice to meet you, Anna. I'm on a mission to find the perfect birthday gift for my mom, but I seem to be circling around these two," he confessed, holding up the card and the trinket for me to see. The card was bright and colorful, with a humorous quip on the front. The trinket, on the other hand, was a small, intricately designed figurine, delicate and refined. I chuckled. Well, they're quite different. What's your mom like? Maybe I can help you choose. James's face lit up with a grateful smile. That would be amazing, thank you. My mom, she's incredible. She's got this sharp wit but also appreciates the finer things. She's been my rock, you know? As he spoke about his mother, his respect and love for her were palpable. It was touching to see a son speak so fondly of his mother. Well, it sounds like she's a woman of depth. How about we find something that celebrates both her sharp wit and her elegant taste? I suggested. We spent the next few minutes discussing his mother's likes and dislikes, her hobbies, and her style. The more we talked, the more I realized how easy and natural it felt to converse with James. He had a way of making every topic interesting and every joke funnier. Eventually, we settled on a beautiful pendant that was both elegant and quirky. It was a small, silver piece with an intricate design, but the centerpiece was a tiny, whimsical figure that seemed to dance in the light. Anna, you're a lifesaver. I would have been lost in here for hours without your help. How can I thank you? James said, his relief evident. How about you save me from having to cook dinner tonight? I joked, half hoping he'd take the bait. James's eyes twinkled with amusement. Dinner it is. There's this cozy little Italian place I know. How does that sound? It sounds perfect, I replied, my heart skipping a beat. We exchanged numbers and made plans to meet up for dinner. As I left the shop, the pendant securely in James's bag, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. In a sea of mundane days, this chance encounter felt like a breath of fresh air. The evening air was crisp, the kind that hinted at the end of summer and the start of something new. I stood outside James's parents' house, my palms sweaty, rehearsing my greeting. Nice to meet you. I practiced under my breath, trying to sound confident, not realizing that no amount of rehearsal could prepare me for the Carters. James opened the door with that familiar, warm smile. Ready? He asked, sensing my nervousness. As I'll ever be, I replied, trying to muster a smile. We stepped into the living room, and that's when I saw her, Mrs. Carter. She sat regally in her armchair, her cane resting against her leg, her eyes scrutinizing me like a hawk. Mr. Carter sat beside her, a silent, almost invisible presence. Mom, Dad, this is Anna, James introduced. Nice to meet you, I said, extending my hand. Mrs. Carter looked at my hand and then at me, her gaze piercing. Sit, dear, she said, her voice firm, ignoring my hand. We sat, and an uncomfortable silence filled the room. I could feel Mrs. Carter's eyes on me, examining, judging. James seemed oblivious to the tension, or maybe he was just used to it. "So, Anna," Mrs. Carter began, her tone casual yet loaded. "James tells us you're an accountant. That must be interesting." "Yes, it's quite rewarding. I love working with numbers, finding solutions," I replied, trying to sound upbeat. She hummed, unimpressed. "And your parents, what do they do?" I explained, but with each answer, her questions grew more personal, more probing. It felt less like a conversation and more like an interrogation. James remained silent, his occasional attempts to change the subject quickly overridden by his mother's pointed questions. "Tell me, Anna, how much do you earn?" Mrs. Carter asked, her tone casual but her intent clear. I was taken aback. It wasn't a question you'd expect in a first meeting, and certainly not in such a straightforward manner. I glanced at James, hoping for some support, but he avoided my gaze. "It's a decent amount. It allows me to live comfortably," I answered vaguely, feeling my cheeks flush. "I see. And this house of yours, you live there alone?" she continued, her curiosity unabashed. "It was my grandmother's. I inherited it," I replied, feeling more like I was in a job interview than meeting my boyfriend's parents. Mrs. Carter nodded, her expression unreadable. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of discomfort. Mr. Carter remained silent, his presence almost ghost-like, while Mrs. Carter's questions lingered in the air, sharp and unnerving. As we left, James seemed pleased. "That went well, don't you think?" he said, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Sure," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. As we drove away, the weight of the evening settled on my shoulders. Mrs. Carter's intense scrutiny and pointed questions lingered in my mind, a stark contrast to the warmth and ease I felt with James. James and I, we were in love, sure, but marriage wasn't on my immediate bingo card. Yet, there we were, standing in my living room, the same one I grew up in, talking about forever. "Anna, I know it's soon, but I feel it, you know?" "Why wait?" James said, his eyes full of that earnestness that first drew me to him. I hesitated, the image of Mrs. Carter's scrutinizing gaze flashing in my mind. "James, your mom, that dinner was intense. Are you sure we're ready for this step?" He took my hands in his, a comforting warmth spreading through me. "Anna, I love you. And yeah, my mom can be a bit much, but don't worry, we'll handle it together. You and me, okay?" His words were a balm, soothing away the doubts. "Okay," I whispered, the word a leap of faith. We decided on a simple ceremony. No grand gestures, no elaborate fanfare, just an intimate gathering of close friends and family. It felt right, true to who we were. But as the day approached, the butterflies in my stomach weren't just from bridal jitters. The wedding was beautiful, a small affair in my backyard. The same trees that witnessed my childhood games now stood witness to my vows. But amidst the joy, there was an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken question hanging in the air: how would the Carters fit into this new picture we were painting? James sensed it, I could tell. As we danced, his hand on my waist, mine on his shoulder, he leaned in. "Don't worry, love. We'll make it work. You, me, and yes, even my parents." I smiled, a mix of hope and apprehension. "Promise?" "Promise," he affirmed, sealing it with a kiss. But promises, I'd learn, are fragile things. The reality hit home when James and I moved into my grandmother's house. It was a quaint place, its walls holding memories of a lifetime. The ramps and low steps, once installed for my grandmother's convenience, now stood as silent testaments to her struggles and strength. "Your grandma had it all figured out, huh?" James remarked one evening, his gaze trailing over the seamless design. "Yeah, she did. She wanted to be independent, no matter what, I said, a hint of pride in my voice. It wasn't long before Mrs. Carter came to visit. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, took in every detail of the house. The way she moved, slowly, deliberately, her cane tapping against the floor, it was like she was marking her territory. "This is a nice place, Anna. Very accommodating," she commented, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. I forced a smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Carter. We like it." But her next words sent a chill down my spine. "It's difficult, you know, living in a place that doesn't understand your needs. I think I'd be better off here." The statement hung in the air, a silent ultimatum. James, ever the peacemaker, tried to navigate the treacherous waters. "Mom, we can discuss this later. Let's not jump into decisions." But the decision, it seemed, was already made. In her mind, Mrs. Carter had found her new abode. And as I looked into James's eyes, searching for the reassurance I so desperately needed, I realized that our swift marriage was about to face its first real test. The day the Carters moved in, the house changed. It wasn't just the extra shoes by the door or the additional toothbrushes in the bathroom. It was like the air itself shifted, dense with the weight of their presence. I was in the kitchen, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become my pantry, when Mrs. Carter hobbled in. Her cane clicked against the floor, a sound that was quickly becoming the soundtrack of my life. "Anna, dear, I was thinking," she started, her voice cutting through the silence. "This shelf is too high. I can't reach anything. You should rearrange it." I bit my lip, holding back a sigh. "Sure, Mrs. Carter. I'll take care of it. And another thing," she continued, oblivious to my growing frustration, "Mark and I should take the bedroom downstairs. It's just too much for me to climb up and down." "But that's our bedroom," I protested weakly, the reality of the situation sinking in. She gave me a look, one that said my comfort was secondary. "Well, it's just practical, dear. You're young, you can manage." Before I could respond, Mr. Carter entered, his presence like a shadow, always there, but never quite tangible. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Just discussing some adjustments," Mrs. Carter replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. As they left, I felt a surge of resentment. My home, my sanctuary, was being dismantled, piece by piece, and I was expected to smile and nod. The days that followed were a blur of demands and critiques. Mrs. Carter had an opinion on everything: how the furniture should be arranged, what meals should be cooked, how the house should be cleaned. And every evening, James would come home to a battlefield, his attempts to mediate often ending in heated arguments. "Anna, we need to be understanding. They're adjusting," he'd say, trying to calm the storm. "Adjusting? James, they're not adjusting, they're invading. This is our home, not a hotel for your parents," I'd retort, my patience wearing thin. But the breaking point came one evening, over dinner. Mrs. Carter had made some offhand comment about the meal, how it wasn't to her liking. Something inside me snapped. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you're used to things a certain way, but this is my home too. I'm doing my best here," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. She looked at me, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Your best isn't good enough, dear. Maybe if you spent less time at that job of yours and more time here, things would be different." I looked at James, desperate for support, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. In that moment, I realized the gravity of the situation. I was an outsider in my own home, my life hijacked by the unwelcome presence of the Carters. The tension in the house was like a thick fog, impossible to ignore. Every morning, I woke up to the same routine: prepare breakfast for 4, rush to work, then come back to a list of complaints and demands. It was like living with a ticking bomb, never knowing when the next explosion would be. One evening, I was in the kitchen, trying to juggle preparing dinner and responding to a flurry of work emails when Mrs. Carter came in, her cane tapping a steady, irritating beat on the floor. "Anna, this kitchen is a mess. And what's for dinner? I hope it's not that bland chicken dish you made last week," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to snap back. "I'm doing the best I can, Mrs. Carter. And it's pasta tonight." She sniffed, making it clear what she thought of my best. "You know, if you weren't so tied up with that job of yours, maybe you'd manage the house better." That was it. The final straw. I turned to face her, my hands trembling with frustration. "Mrs. Carter, I'm working this job to support us. And I'm also trying to manage the house. I'm only one person. I can't do everything." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, maybe you should consider working from home then. That way, you can keep an eye on the house and still do your job." I was flabbergasted. Work from home? Just so I could clean up after them and cook on demand? The thought was suffocating. "James and I have been talking, and we think it's the best solution," she continued, as if reading from a script. I felt a surge of anger. "You've been talking? And what about me? Don't I get a say in this?" Just then, James walked in, and I turned to him, hoping for some support. "James, please tell me you don't agree with this." He looked uncomfortable, caught between his mother and his wife. "Anna, it's just... Mom has a point. It would make things easier." "Easier? For whom? Certainly not for me." I felt like I was drowning, and the people who were supposed to throw me a lifeline were instead pushing me further under. "James, this is not about making things easier. It's about respect and boundaries. Your parents moved into my house, and now they're trying to dictate how I live and work. This is not okay," I said, my voice rising with every word. Mrs. Carter interjected, her tone patronizing. "Anna, dear, we're family now. We should be helping each other, not arguing over trivial things." Trivial things? My job, my independence, my sanity, were these trivial things? I looked at James, searching his eyes for the man I married, the man who promised to stand by me. But all I saw was indecision, a man torn between his wife and his mother. Under the relentless pressure from Mrs. Carter and the passive compliance of James, I found myself boxed into a corner with no escape. The air in the house was thick with my silent acquiescence as I reluctantly agreed to work from home. Each day melted into the next, a monotonous blend of keystrokes, cooking, and cleaning, all under the watchful, often disapproving, gaze of Mrs. Carter. James, for his part, seemed blind to the imbalance, content to let the scales tip ever in favor of his parents. Then came that fateful evening, the one where the weight of my silence became too heavy to bear. We were gathered around the dinner table, the air heavy with the scent of the meal I had spent hours preparing. Mrs. Carter was mid-complaint about the seasoning of the chicken when I finally found my voice. "I'm tired," I said, the words falling from my lips like heavy stones. "I'm tired of trying to balance work and taking care of everyone's needs. Maybe it's time we considered living separately." The words hung in the air, a fragile bubble of hope destined to burst. Mrs. Carter paused, her fork mid-air, her eyes locking with mine. Then, to my utter disbelief, she nodded. "I agree," she said, her voice smooth as silk, her tone matter of fact. "This arrangement isn't ideal. But this house, it's so well equipped for our needs. So, Anna, it would make sense for you to find another place." The room spun, her words a gut punch that knocked the air from my lungs. I turned to James, desperate for him to intervene, to stand up for us, for our home. But the man I looked to for support merely echoed his mother's sentiment. "Mom's right, Anna. This house suits their needs. You can leave here if you like," he said, his words slicing through the last tether of my restraint. His words, so casually delivered, were the culmination of 1,000 tiny betrayals. The man I loved, the man I had built a life with, was offering up my sanctuary, my grandmother's legacy, on a silver platter to appease his parents. Without a word, I pushed my chair back and stood up. The legs of the chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp and final. I could feel their eyes on me, wide with surprise, as I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had looked up just moments ago, my fingers steady, my resolve unwavering. The room was silent except for the muffled voice on the other end of the phone. "Yes, I need to schedule a move," I said, my voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. A look of triumph flickered across Mrs. Carter's face, a smug smile curling her lips as she mistook my actions. She thought I was conceding, retreating from my own home. But the reality of my words hadn't hit her yet. I turned to face her, my eyes locking with hers. "Mrs. Carter, you seem to be misunderstanding the situation. The movers aren't for me. They're for you, your husband, and James. You have until the end of the day to pack your things and leave my house." The silence that followed was profound, the words hanging in the air like a verdict. Mrs. Carter's face drained of color, her triumphant smile faltering, transforming into a mask of disbelief and shock. But this is our home now. You can't just throw us out," she stammered, her voice trembling with a mix of outrage and fear. "This was never your home. You imposed yourselves, and your son allowed it. But I'm reclaiming what's rightfully mine," I replied, my voice unwavering. James was on his feet now, his face a mixture of confusion and desperation. "Anna, please, let's talk about this. You don't need to do this. We're a family." The word family hit me like a slap in the face. This was not how family treated each other. This was not how love manifested. "James, a family respects each other. A family supports each other. What happened here was manipulation and disrespect. I'll have the divorce papers sent to you tomorrow," I said, the finality of my words sealing the fate of our marriage. Mrs. Carter started to cry, her sobs a cacophony of disbelief and loss. James tried to plead, his words a jumbled mess of apologies and promises. But it was too late. The decision had been made, the line drawn. The day after the movers had cleared out the last of the Carters' belongings, I stood in the middle of my living room. The sun streamed through the windows, its light touching every corner, every surface, as if to cleanse the space of the heavy shadows of the past months. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the constant noise and tension that had become my daily reality. I wandered from room to room, each step feeling lighter than the last. The house was mine again, my sanctuary, my refuge. I could breathe, truly breathe, without the weight of their expectations suffocating me. It was in this moment of solitude that the doorbell rang, a gentle chime that seemed too loud in the quiet of the house. I opened the door to find my friend Sarah standing there, a warm smile on her face and a casserole dish in her hands. "Heard you might need some company and comfort food," she said, stepping inside. We made our way to the kitchen, the aroma of the casserole filling the space, a scent of normalcy, of home. As we sat down at the table, Sarah reached for my hand, her touch grounding. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I took a deep breath, the future a blank canvas before me. "Now, I start over. I rebuild, on my terms. It's daunting, sure, but also liberating." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding and support. "You know, sometimes the best beginnings come from the hardest endings. You've got this, Anna. You're stronger than you think." Her words resonated, a gentle reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the storm. "I guess it's time to find out what I'm really made of," I said, a tentative smile on my lips. The conversation flowed, the comfort of old friendship wrapping around me like a warm blanket. We talked about everything and nothing, the laughter and chatter a balm to my weary soul. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that this was more than just a new beginning. It was a chance to rediscover myself, to redefine my boundaries, to live my life unapologetically.